Now, turn off all the lights and get ready to never sleep again.
We used to live here by Polterkites. The family at my doorstep looked normal enough. Normal in the 1950s sitcom kind of way. Tall dad with a Cary Grant smile and a short blonde wife with a red purse. Behind them, 3 blonde kids who looked so much alike they could have been triplets. Maybe they were. I was in the middle of prepping dinner when this poster child of a nuclear family showed up. "Hello, miss," said the father. "We used to live here." "Oh, nice," I said. Right then my dog, a patchy black and white mutt named Patchy, strode into the foyer, motionless. Usually she loved strangers. I stepped outside and pulled the door mostly shut. Patchy also loved running into busy highways. "The dog," I said, explaining why I stepped outside. "What's the breed?" said the father. Clusterfuck. The mom winced like someone spat in her face. "Sorry," I said. The dad chuckled. "We have a mutt back home too," he said. "Yeah? Cool." Awkward silence. So anyways," he said, "if it's not too much of a bother, would you mind if we show the kids around? 15 minutes tops." "Around the house?" "We'd like to show them where their older sister grew up, if that's not a problem." I forced a smile. I don't know, Behind me, the dog shoved her nose through the cracked open door, sniffing as she tried to push her way outside. "Inside!" I snapped, and she scurried away. I pulled the door fully shut. "Sorry, my girlfriend's coming over soon, and There was another flinch in the mother's face, this time at the word girlfriend, an all too boring reaction. I could almost hear her thinking, "Hate the sin, not the hater." "Say no more," said the dad, stepping back. "We understand. This was all very last minute, and thank you regardless." The kids' faces filled with silent disappointment. "We'll be passing through," he continued, "in another year or so. I'll give you a proper heads up next time." Another year? I thought, starting to feel a little bad. Chronic people pleasers unite. The family turned away and strode back towards a red minivan parked on the street. I checked the time. "Hey," I called out. 15 minutes? The dad looked back over his shoulder. "Tops." They started in an upstairs bedroom. Curious, I followed. "This room used to be bright pink," he said, pointing into a white-walled guest room. "Abby had a bunk bed with a slide over there." He looked up. "Glow stars still up there, huh?" He chuckled, looking back at me. I smiled. Never noticed them before. "And this room," he said, stepping back into the hallway and strolling towards my bedroom. He gently pushed open the door to reveal my nuclear disaster of a room. Walls covered in video game posters, floors covered in dirty clothes. This was our second mess room. "Now it's just a mess," I said. He looked back at me, confused. Then he realized I was trying to be funny. He laughed politely. "And this room over here," he stepped back across the hall. "I'm going to be downstairs," I said. "Feel free to keep showing yourselves around." "Thank you." He trailed off into realizing that he didn't know my name. "Maya," I said. "Thank you, Maya." He turned back to his family and continued the tour. I was setting the table when they came downstairs. My dog sniffed around the floor, searching for fallen remnants of steak. A living vacuum cleaner. The dad strolled up towards the basement door across the living room. "Here's where we measured Abby's height," he said, pointing at the doorframe. "It's all painted over now." He ran a hand over the smooth white finish. That's when I noticed something a little odd. Ever since they'd shown up, only the dad spoke. Not a single word from anyone else. Just silent nodding and smiling. Maybe they were even more traditional than they looked. Maybe they were mute. The dad reached for the basement door and tried turning the handle. Locked. "Excuse me," he called over. "Oh, sorry, I'm renovating down there." He blinked at me. "And?" "Yeah, lots of power tools. Clutter," I said. "Not exactly safe." "We'll be careful," he said, glancing down to his kids, then back to me, hands still gripped around the locked doorknob. "Sorry, it's not exactly work-safe standards down there, and some of the lights aren't working yet." A moment of silence. "We'll be careful," he said again, and his jaw muscle twitched. "No, sorry." Loaded silence, and then, "Of course." He stepped away from the door and put his hands up. "Sorry to pester." He dropped his hands, slid them into his pocket, and meandered towards the kitchen. His family waited behind. "Go get your coats on," he said. They nodded silently and stepped back into the foyer, leaving him and I alone. He glanced over at the set dinner table, then back to me. "Thanks again for letting us take a look around," he said. "It means a lot to the kids." "Yeah, no problem," I said, pulling a shepherd's pie out of the oven. "Smells good," he said. "Thanks." He lingered at the edge of the kitchen, rubbing the back of his neck with his hand. "This is a little embarrassing, but he blushed red. "Have you ever noticed anything off here?" "Off?" I set the pie down onto the dining room table, pulled off my still warm oven mitts, and tucked them between my arms. He smiled grimly. "Well, I don't believe in," he trailed off, "or any of that stuff, but there was something odd going on when we lived here." He turned and looked out the kitchen window, staring at his reflection imposed over the night outside. "Margaret, my spouse, she didn't even want to come back here." I raised an eyebrow, intrigued. I was a sucker for ghost stories, bullshit or not. "I haven't really noticed anything," I said. He waved his hands. "Of course." He turned away from the window and strolled back towards the foyer. "Anyways, thanks again." "Wait," I said. He stopped. My curiosity was beyond piqued. "What happened?" I said. He checked the time on his wrist, then scanned down the hallway towards the foyer. His family was distracted. The kids argued about something, and the mom tried to calm them down. I guess they weren't mute after all. He turned back to me, stepped up to the edge of the kitchen, and lowered his voice a bit. "Nothing too crazy," he said. "Just little things. Dog barking at the wall for no reason, lights turning on and off. One time Margaret swore she saw somebody, buck naked, in the middle of winter, climbing on the roof. I went to look and nobody, no footprints in the snow either." He shrugged. "Margaret, I love her, but she's always been a believer, to say it tactfully, so I kept brushing it off." He glanced back to the foyer again, as if making sure his family couldn't hear. "But then, this one night, an old woman shows up at our front door. Late 60s, early 70s maybe. She's bundled up like winter in the middle of summer." His jaw tensed up slightly, then relaxed. "She told us she used to live here. Said her late husband built the place. Said she wanted to take a look around, much the same we did earlier. We obliged, of course." He sighed. "It was fine at first, just her walking from room to room, talking about random memories, like how she used to use our guest room as a sewing room, how her husband ran his construction business from the living room. But then she steps into my first daughter, Abby's room. Abby's just 10 years old back then, reading at her study table. And this old woman steps into the room, freezes, then just starts losing her mind, screaming at us, 'Get out of my house! Get out of my house!' This poor woman basically had a psychotic breakdown right in front of us. It took us 20 minutes just to calm her down." He shook his head, eyes filled with sadness. Turns out she was a runaway. Assisted living. Oh, wow, that's really sad. He nodded. House never really felt the same after that. All the odd happenings, well, they just got worse. Way worse. One time in the middle of the night, every single light in the house turned on at the same time. Power surge, right? He shook his head. The switches were flicked on, too. He rubbed his jaw. Then, one night, a giant boulder shows up in our basement. He breathed out his nose like it was almost funny. Can you imagine that? A couch-sized boulder just inexplicably sat in the basement corner one morning, too big to fit in or out through any doors. His eyes flicked towards the basement door. Is it still there? What? The boulder. Is it still in the basement? I shook my head. It wasn't. He studied me, skeptical. Do you mind if I take a quick look down there? Just me, no kids? He pulled out his phone. I can use this for light. No, sorry. At this point, I honestly didn't care if he went into the basement or not. I was just standing my ground out of principle now. He half smiled and tucked his phone away. After the boulder showed up, the visitors started showing up. Sometimes twice a week. Random strangers at the door, all of them claiming they used to live here, asking if they could take a look around. He looked back over his shoulder towards his family. They were waiting for him now. Anyways, he shrugged, I'm glad none of that's happening to you. The fact he was a visitor who asked to take a look around hung in the air like a dead smell. His eyes drifted down to the metal meat tenderizer on the counter. He reached over and lifted it. What's this for? A growing tension twisted in my gut. Everything about his body language was relaxed, but that almost made it worse. It's a meat tenderizer. He raised his eyebrows, confused. It's for tenderizing meat, I said. Mallet still in hand, he glanced over at the set dinner table. Looks good. Thanks, I said, stepping back towards the fridge. Noticing my tension, he set the mallet down. He stepped up to the table. Is there enough for us? He asked. Was he joking? He wasn't. Sorry, we've just been driving for hours and we're famished. I looked at him, unbelieving. I can pay, he said, reaching into his back pocket and pulling out his wallet. No, that's okay, I said. Let me get some Tupperwares. At this point, I just wanted them gone. I strode across the kitchen, squat down at the corner cupboard, and started digging through. Behind me, I could hear the rest of his family shuffling into the kitchen. Weird. Finally, I found the right stack of containers. I stood up, turned around, and I froze. The family sat around my dinner table, eating and talking as if they'd been there for a while. The parents ate from the set plates, but the kids ate their food right off the tablecloth. Okay, what? I said, incredulous. Everything went dead silent. They turned to look at me, eyes filled with confusion. The dad was in the middle of cutting into the steak. Are you okay, miss? He said, voice strained with tension. I had no words. They were looking at me the same way people look at a raving lunatic, forced calm. My dog strutted into the room and lurched to a stop. She started growling. Miss, it's fine. We're okay here, said the dad, gently placing the steak knife down, wiping his hands onto his sides, and stepping up from the table. But we're gonna need to go outside, okay? He stepped around the table. I glanced over at Patchy, and a sickening twist of dread came over me. She wasn't growling at the family. She was growling at me. She's okay. She's okay, he said, talking to the dog. Miss, we're gonna step outside and we can get you whatever you need, okay? Do you need money? Food? He stepped towards my dog and crouched down. I'm sure you're not dangerous, he said, talking to me. But right now, I just need you away from my family, just in case, okay? He stroked Patchy's neck. She stopped growling and her tail started wagging. Miss? He said, looking up at me. I don't know what this is, I said, but you all need to leave right the fuck now, I hissed through grit teeth. The father looked to his wife, and she looked down at him, sadness in their eyes. He held out his hand, and she reached onto the table and grabbed the steak knife and handed it to him. Knife gripped in his hand, he looked at me, sighed, pulled my dog close, and pushed the knife into the side of her jaw. It's okay, he whispered to the whimpering dog. It's okay. His eyes watered. I couldn't move. I couldn't even scream. I just stood there, paralyzed. Everything silent as the rest of his family broke into a flurry of panic, leaping away from the table and backing into the wall, faces filled with terror, but not with terror of him, terror of me. My eyes drifted to the metal mallet set on the counter's edge. Before I knew it, it was in my hand, and I was charging toward him. I swung, and the mallet cracked against the side of his jaw. The mother shrieked as he leapt towards me and tackled me to the ground, pinning me down, face first against the cold, vinyl floor. Margaret, call the police, he yelled, yanking the mallet from his hand and tossing it. The mallet thudded to the ground, slid across the floor, and streaked through a puddle of dog's blood. Calm down, he hissed, the spittle from his mouth dotting against the back of his neck. I kicked and screamed, but it was no use. My head was pinned sideways against the floor, staring at the dead eyes of my dog. A slowly expanding puddle of blood between us. He held me there until the police arrived. This is the point in my experience where I might lose some of you, especially those with a more rationalist worldview. You might think I'm crazy, and I very well might be. But spending the last while locked away in a high-security psych ward, I've had a lot of time to do a lot of research. And all of it led me to only one possible conclusion. The family, or whatever they were, was able to bend reality itself. Of course, when the police showed up, I told them everything. How the visiting family seated themselves at my dinner table and began to eat my dinner. How I confronted them, and they proceeded to act like I was some sort of lunatic intruder. How the father stepped up from the table and murdered my dog with a steak knife. The family's version, of course, was the exact opposite. They were enjoying a peaceful steak dinner at home when a crazed woman showed up and proceeded to kill their beloved family dog. Then she assaulted the father with a cooking mallet. Complete bullshit, save for the mallet part. I knew enough about legal proceedings and modern-day forensics to know my case was rock solid, not to mention the fact my name was on the deeds to the house. This was cut and dry, but that's not how any of it played out. Even according to official documents, the family owned the home, and they'd been living there for years. All my neighbors vouched for the family, even this young couple I used to trade recipes with. Nobody recognized me anymore, not even my girlfriend. According to the lead psychiatrist here at the criminal psych ward, I've been in and out of mental wards my whole life. According to her, I escaped from some other ward upstate years ago. A homeless drifter who wandered into some normal family's home. They tell me I've got a laundry list of psychotic conditions, and my version of events is nothing but an elaborate hallucination. Complete bullshit. Now, I've done enough reading to know that hallucinations don't work that way. They don't work like they do in the movies, with neatly tied up ends and continuity. These weren't hallucinations. This family altered reality. That was the only explanation. Of course, I can't say that flat out anymore. That'll just keep me locked in here longer. But if I can find enough evidence, if I can lay out my case with reason and facts, then I'm almost there too. I'm gonna tie all these threads together. It's taken me 12 years of being locked away in this hellhole, but I'm almost free. I know it. Just a few more months of research and I'll convince them. Anyways, I've gotta go soon. My internet time's almost up, and I'm technically not allowed to be posting this anyways. But I know what you're thinking right about now. You're probably siding with the psychiatrist. You probably think I'm crazy. But you just wait. Just give me a few more months. I'm gonna blow this whole thing wide open. You'll see. Everyone will finally learn what this family did to me. Everyone will finally know the truth. Any day now. Greetings, spoils and ghouls. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, subscribe and hit the bell so you don't miss out. If you have a request or suggestion, make sure to leave them in the comment section below. We hope you enjoyed this video, and remember to stay spooky.